Welcome to English Alien. Here are some ways to practice. We have reading comprehension. There will be questions about the chapter at the end and in the description box below the video. Answer the questions in the comment section. Listening comprehension. You can close your eyes and listen to me read the story, then answer the questions in the comment section. Pronunciation. You can pause the video, read the words out loud with your voice, then play the video and listen to compare your pronunciation with mine. Chapter 7 Vocabulary. Pause the video, review the definitions. We will go over them after the chapter. The Force in the Forest by English Alien. Chapter 7. Through the windows, Alejandro and Oscar saw 6 police officers approaching the house. A feeling of hope ignited in Oscar when he recognized one of the officers. The officer in charge, Carlos Hernandez, was from his neighborhood. Oscar then quickly told Alejandro his plan to get his friend's attention and calm the situation. Alejandro agreed, and Oscar called out to the group of police officers, "Carlos, we want to talk." Fortunately, since the officer was an old acquaintance of Oscar, he was willing to listen to their version of events. The armed and alert police officers surrounded the house. Alejandro remained silent and nervous, aware of the tense situation they were in. Meanwhile, Oscar tried to stay calm and talk with the officer he knew to avoid a violent confrontation. Eventually, they managed to sit at the table in the living room, with Officer Hernandez leading the conversation. The other officers maintained strategic position, ready to act if the situation got out of control. As everyone settled into their positions, Alejandro noticed that the skin on his arm, where the strange texture had appeared, was not only darker and rougher, but was visibly spreading. Officer Hernandez fixed his gaze on Alejandro and began questioning him about the missing tourists. "What can you tell me about the disappearance of the tourists in the forest?" he asked, with a stern expression on his face. Alejandro hesitated for a moment, unsure on how to respond. His eyes shifted towards Oscar, seeking his help. Oscar gave him a reassuring pat on the back, encouraging him to speak. Finally, Alejandro took a deep breath and replied, "I don't know exactly what happened, and I don't think you would believe me if I told you what I saw." Officer Hernandez frowned, appearing unconvinced. His body language displayed tension. "Well, we have to start somewhere. Just talk about what you saw and describe what happened." Alejandro recounted his story about the tour, the attack, and how he woke up alone in the forest just yesterday. However, he didn't tell Officer Hernandez about the changes he was going through himself and his newfound connection to the forest. Hernandez, deep in thought after hearing Alejandro's story, audibly exhaled. "Purple lights, lost time, an invisible force. Your story is difficult for me to believe. And even if I did, I don't know what to do with what you have told me, he responded. Alejandro looked Officer Hernandez directly in the eyes. I'm telling you the truth. I don't know what happened to the tourists, but something strange and dangerous is happening in the forest. Hernandez grew even more tense upon hearing Alejandro's words, but before he could respond, one of the other officers burst into the room. Boss, we found something, he exclaimed. The other officers discovered the torn and bloody clothes that Alejandro had been wearing when he disappeared. Can you explain this? Officer Hernandez asked, pointing to the bloody clothing. Where are the missing tourists? He asked with more frustration. Alejandro hesitated before responding. His mind focused on the new skin that was spreading faster. As the situation grew more tense, he could feel it spreading faster throughout his arm. I don't know exactly. We were attacked in the forest. I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was alone and had no idea where the tourists were, he exclaimed. The officers exchanged looks of disbelief and mistrust. It's been a month since they disappeared. How is it possible that you have no idea where they are? Hernandez asked accusingly. Alejandro tried to explain, but his body language showed uncertainty and nervousness. I'm sorry, I don't know how to explain it. Everything has been confusing since I woke up in the forest, but I swear I have nothing to do with the disappearance of the tourists. One of the officers who had been closely observing Alejandro noticed that the skin on his arm was changing. He suddenly stood up from his seat and drew his weapon, pointing it directly at Alejandro. What the hell are you? The officer shouted, visibly frightened. You're not human. You're a demon. The other officers also became tense, drew their weapons, and started aiming them at Alejandro and Oscar. Chapter 7 Vocabulary Review. To be in charge, okay? To have control or with overall responsibility. Okay, so this is usually phrased as, the person in charge. Okay. The officer in charge, Carlos Hernandez, was from his neighborhood. Alert, an adjective. Quick to notice any unusual and potentially dangerous or difficult circumstances. Vigilant. Okay, so to be alert is to be very aware of what is presently happening. The armed and alert police officers surrounded the house. To fix his gaze. To look at someone or something steadily. Okay, so that is to have extreme focus with your eyes. Officer Hernandez fixed his gaze on Alejandro and began questioning him about the missing tourists. Stern. This is an adjective meaning serious and unrelenting, especially in expressing authority and the exercise of discipline. Okay, so usually people would refer to their stern parents. Okay, strict and serious parents. What can you tell me about the disappearance of the tourists in the forest? He asked with a stern expression on his face. Reassuring. Okay, serving or intended to remove someone's doubts or fears. Okay, so this is a way to give someone confidence, is to kind of take away doubts and fears by reassuring them. To encourage, to give support, confidence, or hope to someone. Oscar gave him a reassuring pat on the back, encouraging him to speak. Unconvinced. Okay, not certain that something is true or can be relied on or trusted. Officer Hernandez frowned, appearing unconvinced. So if you fail to persuade someone, they are unconvinced. To recount. Tell someone about something. Okay, give an account of an event or experience. Okay, so this is an interesting word. If you pronounce it recount, okay, it is to count something again. But to recount is to tell someone about something. Alejandro recounted his story about the tour, the attack, and how he woke up alone in the forest just yesterday. Audibly, an adverb. In a way that can be heard. Okay, so it makes noise. Hernandez, deep in thought after hearing Alejandro's story, audibly exhaled. To notice. The fact of observing or paying attention to something. One of the officers who had been closely observing Alejandro noticed that the skin on his arm was changing. Frightened, afraid, or anxious. A synonym would be scared. What the hell are you? The officer shouted, visibly frightened. Chapter 7 Questions. Choose one or more questions to answer in the comments section below. Answer in complete sentences. I will respond with feedback and error correction to the first 50 comments. Number 1. Where did Oscar know the officer in charge from? Number 2. What does Alejandro talk about and what does he not talk about? Number 3. How does Carlos respond to Alejandro's story? Number 4. Why did the police officers panic? And number 5. Write a question the story created for you. I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you for visiting English Alien. Click subscribe and get notified for new content.